Hello and welcome to episode 35 of Sport Unlocked, the podcast, giving you the inside track on the world of sports news. Coming up in the final 20 minutes of the pod, we're going to go in depth on the dispute between FIFA and UEFA and the origins of the spat between Gianni Infantino and Alexander Shevrin that's exploding again over that biennial World Cup push. Before then, we're crossing to Italy for the latest on Juventus' turmoil on the pitch and their financial mess too. We'll also discuss the fallout this week from the Super League. Yes, the legal battles do continue. And we'll also talk DAZN, all mixed in with a bit of football governance chat and just how the game should be run. Most importantly, if you're enjoying the pod, please hit subscribe and you can message us at Sport Unlocked on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Then your questions can be answered on the show by me, Rob Harris from the Associated Press, as well as Martyn Ziegler from the Times and Tariq Panja from the New York Times. And they both join me now after we got to spend the week hanging around the hotel lobby again for the first time in more than 18 months at a Premier League owners and chief executives meeting in London. It was good to be back, wasn't it?
Yeah, good to see you guys. Enjoyed our coffee and toast in the Landmark Hotel in Marylebone, which is the first time there's been a London meeting of the Premier League clubs for 18 months in person. So it was quite good to see some people, have a chat. I mean, quite often when you go to these things, the Premier League chief executives and chairman are sometimes a bit reluctant to speak, but we managed to get some sort of intelligence about what's happening on a few issues. So it's definitely well worth the trip, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I suppose so. But the fear in the eyes of some of these executives when you introduce yourself and you say, "Hey, what's happening today?" Something as basic as that. Running a mile away, it's like you're sort of carrying the plague. I know we're living in the age of the plague right now, but my goodness, there was one guy who honestly was absolutely terrified, and I was just wondering, I then asked, I followed up with a question actually, said, look, it's nothing to do with any of the issues you're discussing. It's just more about us. What is it about three or four journalists that terrifies everyone so much? And it was just kind of a blank stare and a smile and walking as fast as possible. And I said, look, is it that you're scared you're getting misquoted or something like that? And it was like this weird sheepish nod of, I guess, one of the most powerful men in football. What a really odd thing to do, because he's speaking his native tongue. It's not like a foreign footballer talking to a journalist somewhere. It's a quote. You're saying it. Think about what you're going to say. This really needs to be sorted out, if I'm honest.
Because to set the scene, we're hanging around the hotel lobby. They're often drifting in and out of the meeting room, walking by. Some do choose to stop. Some from the Premier League do, to have a chat, particularly when we've not seen them for a long time. Some have a very, very brisk walking pace, so they do their best not to speak. And very often, we are the way of transmitting some of their views more widely to fans, and also to give a voice to clubs sometimes that are not at the top. And, well, one person we did hear speak was Christian Purslow from Aston Villa, who then ends up sounding like the voice of the Premier League as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, Christian's not one who's afraid of the mic, I suppose, and maybe they leave it to him. He particularly embraces his opportunity to have a platform. It was that famous 3-4 minute video explaining the Jack Grealish transfer to Manchester City that he seemed to relish a couple of months ago. But yeah, I would say few and far between. You guys, you got to be honest, in terms of the words we do get, it's snatches of conversation, a minute or two here or there. It seems really we've spared several hours. It's like almost if you're watching these police detective shows and you're sitting in a car waiting for something to happen. It is a tough slog sometimes.
Yeah, it's. I mean, as you say, it's hit and miss. Sometimes you actually get really good stories, but I think the thing about the chairman and chief executives, I think it's actually a sort of insecurity. They're worried that they're going to be sort of that their peers at other clubs are going to think less of them if they see them talking to particular journalist, or they don't want to get into trouble with the Premier League chief executive or chairman themselves, or feel like they're being speaking out of turn. But on the other hand, those people who are confident enough in their own positions are happy to have chats. Where there've been plenty of times, and people have just filled us in on a background basis of what their clubs think on particular issues. So it can be worth it. I mean, we spoke to the Arsenal chief executive Vinay Ventakasham. He was, absolutely fine talking about safe standing, their plans. Arsenal, one of the only big six clubs who've not actually done anything so far to introduce the sort of safe standing area, which is going to be now permitted from January the 1st. But he said they're gonna meet with the Arsenal Supporters Trust to explore those issues. So it can be done.
We should drill down to some of the things that were talked about, and one of the big talking points we'll get onto later is the latest in the UEFA FIFA battles and just why they do exist. On safe standing, first time since 1994-95 season, it looks like we are going to have it in the top two divisions in England.
Yeah, this is a sort of final part of government policy. They've been reviewing it. They've been looking at the trial that's been taking place in Celtic. See what's been happening in the Bundesliga. Quite a few clubs already have the facilities in place. These flip seats. I mean, the best example of this is Tottenham Hotspur, who've got it in both the home and away ends, which you will need. And in that stadium, you are going to have, almost certainly, because you have to apply and get permission, but you're going to have a substantial number of fans being able to stand from January the 1st. Manchester City, they're also already set up for it, and I think Chelsea as well, and Liverpool, Man United, and Wolverhampton Wanderers. They just need to make some adjustments, perhaps, to their the away facilities, and they could join in too.
Do you think that would mean reduced ticket prices? Because one of the things those Manchester City fans were saying last week after the Pep Guardiola comments about not being able to fill their stadium was like perhaps the cost of games, in light of the economy. Do you think if standings introduced, the seating price could come down, or the admission price should come down?
It's hard to see that because actually they're taking up the exact same space, and I think in some cases it might actually lead to a reduction in seating for the infrastructure, because actually every seat has to have the ability to stand or sit. So it's hard to see how they will cut revenue, particularly when they're trying to generate ever more. That's not saying that clubs shouldn't be working to reduce.
So my next question would be, I guess, these are just a small percentage of seats, and my experience of going to football over the years is lots of fans stand anyway in the seating areas. Do you think it's going to do anything to stop those folks who are standing anyway in the seats from standing?
I mean, I think it's a long time to go, isn't it? I think the larger portions of stadiums would have to have the safe standing areas with this flip seat option. So, I mean, eventually it will. I don't think it's going to be anything immediate, because those people who want to stand in their seated areas will continue to do so, I'm sure. But I think this is a really positive thing. I mean, interestingly, the Tracy Crouch, who's doing the independent review of football, has done an interview in the Times, in which she says they're also going to look at allowing people to drink beer and alcohol in the seats again. So it's almost like going back to the early '80s, standing up, being able to drink in your seats.
Well, that's quite interesting. Do you reckon that's like treating people like adults? I suppose after so long, it's only in football grounds you can't do that. But after what happened at Wembley, do you think? When I say what happened at Wembley, I mean during the final of Euro 2020, England Italy, couldn't get a bigger match than that. The shambles and the behaviour of fans. In light of that, is that a good idea? I don't know. I think in normal walks of life, people are able to drink without being lunatics. But that night at Wembley seemed to show that on big match days, there seems to be a certain segment of certainly England fans who wanted to behave in like total morons.
And often, particularly when you're getting big groups together. I got the sense from Tracy Crouch's comments that she's particularly looking at the lower leagues, where actually being able to drink inside the ground next to the pitch is a way of maybe encouraging people to go to lower league games, even in the non-league, where obviously you can't just go to a small club and have a drink while you're watching a match in a tiny venue.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is League One and League Two they're looking at initially. I think it's a challenge when you get these massive matches, as you say, like the Euros final. I mean, in Scotland, they don't allow alcohol to be sold at all, as far as I'm aware, not even in the concourses. So you can say, at least in England, they're certainly a step ahead of that. But I think you're right. This thing about treating people like adults a bit more. The only thing I would say against it is having been to a couple of rugby union internationals sitting with supporters. And it's a real pain. People getting up to go to the bar in the middle of the match, like the whole row has to stand up. People, walk through and then come back again, have to stand up again, come back again, carrying about 6 pints of beer. I actually think from that, but that's a better argument for not allowing it, just that it disrupts other people's enjoyment of the game.
Guys, the other thing, there was another thing at the meeting. You said it's the first in-person Premier League meeting for 18 months. Also, the first
In London.
in London, and perhaps the first in-person meeting since the Super League breakaway with those 6 teams who attempted to start a Super League and then which collapsed within 48 hours. Was there supposed to be an owners' charter or a new agreement signed up? What's happening with that?
Well, this was meant to be the mechanism in place to fend off future breakaways, and the impression I got is they conveniently managed to run out of time in the meeting to be able to talk about it, didn't they?
Yeah, I think there was a worry that it wouldn't go through in its current format. I think the problem is with some of the clubs is they don't think it's strong enough. They don't think it makes it absolutely clear that if you join a breakaway competition, you will be expelled from the Premier League. That's what they want in there. And I think there's a feeling it's a bit toothless, which is why I think the Premier League were happy for it to be delayed to another meeting maybe next month, and perhaps they will look at it again. Interestingly, somebody who wasn't there, talking of the Super League, is perhaps somebody who's been was one of the architects, Ed Woodward, Manchester United. I know he is not long for the United world because he's due to leave the club at the end of the year, but interesting he didn't turn up.
He's had a lot of positive press in the recent months, though, as he prepares to depart Manchester United. Of course,
Often changed as well, doesn't it?
We were hoping to ask him. We've seen a lot of these reports that Ed Woodward was firmly not in favour of the Super League. We thought this might be a chance to actually ask him the question ourselves. Unfortunately, he swerved that meeting. And also, he's been said in plenty of reports. I mean, there were features on these in multiple publications of how Ronaldo might not have joined Manchester United but for the intervention and quick thinking and quick work of Ed Woodward. It would be nice to talk to him about that as well. We didn't sadly get a chance to talk to him.
Well, it's never quiet, though, on the Super League front, whether at the Premier League meeting or beyond. Just in the last week, we've had a Spanish judge telling UEFA to stop sanctioning clubs over the Super League, but it's very unclear if this judge has any jurisdiction at all to do so.
Well, I don't know. I think he has certainly spooked them. The process UEFA was going down afterwards has slowed somewhat, I think, and they're not laughing it away. They've assembled lawyers in London and in Spain and put together pages and pages of documents to challenge this. There's supposed to be a hearing, I think, next month, and things should become a bit clearer. The issue at hand with this particular judgment is the agreement that was signed with the 9 clubs that withdrew. To cast your mind back, those 9 signed up to, I suppose, a punishment, having a percentage of their Champions League income docked, and also vowing never to pursue something like this again. Now that, as far as that judge is concerned, is contrary to an injunction that was filed on the Monday, the hours after the Super League launched, that said UEFA or FIFA, any of these football organs, must not do anything to stymie the Super League pending a clearer legal declaration. However, UEFA would say that this wasn't a punishment. This was 9 clubs and a counterparty in UEFA coming to an agreement about something. But yeah, it's murky, and this judge is like a dog with a bone. I don't know how far his office is from those of Real Madrid, but he's very very certain in I suppose blocking any attempts from UEFA, and I suppose supporting those 3 teams, Barca, Juventus, and Real Madrid, who are intent on pursuing a Super League still.
And you can see why perhaps Juventus are so keen on a Super League. Now we have their financial results. They reported losses of 210 million euros for the 2020-21 financial year. They're blaming the pandemic, but certainly some of their investments in players have not paid off, and we've seen that with Cristiano Ronaldo leaving. And the annual report also has some details on the Super League, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it. I thought actually the wording it said about the Super League, which says, as at today, it is not possible to predict with certainty the outcome and future development of the Super League project, the legitimacy of which Juventus remains confident. To me, that sounded like a sort of that they were almost admitting that it wasn't going to go anywhere, which in a way is obvious because you can't have a Super League with 3 clubs. But I thought it just indicated that despite this court action, it seems to me that I almost as though the court action is a preventative measure to stop themselves being kicked out of the Champions League or facing some other sort of sanctions. What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I thought because the court action was filed before, and I'm of the view a little bit that it would be nice to see an outcome at the European Union level about this, about how much power UEFA and FIFA, these institutions, have over competition organising. Because, for example, must it be UEFA that runs club competitions and also is responsible for disciplinary and governance? For me, these issues have always been in conflict. They seem sometimes unable to use their disciplinary powers because it might hinder the event, the Champions League. And I think it's an inherent conflict of interest. If this thing could be separated, and I'm not saying a 12-team Super League is a good idea. It isn't a closed Super League. But why, for example, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but, the European Club Association has 200 and however many members. Why can't it be responsible for organising the club competition and UEFA be the competent body for discipline and for financial regulation or whatever? Just split these things up a little bit. Putting all that in UEFA's basket or in FIFA's basket, it creates a lot of, I think, inherent conflict.
And allows them to sort of amass power as well in such a way that might give a dominance that is anti-competitive as well.
But I mean, is there any sort of example you can think of in sport where that exists? I just
yeah, but we're in 2021. These things existed. These things are like, yes, we've had them since 19 whatever. It needs to be like this. And we talked about it last week or the week before. This player release situation with FIFA, for example, right? We had them having a discussion with leagues and clubs, a sort of discussion, and then doing whatever they wanted anyway. And having the power to discipline them because it was FIFA's World Cup. And now I just think that there is a kind of a mismatch here. And we can go into the biennial World Cup debate a little bit here and talk about who's going to decide and who's going to be impacted. Everyone's going to be impacted, but Bangladesh and Germany and 211 others decide. None of these big or small clubs have a say. None of these big or small leagues have a say. And none of the players' unions have a say. Maybe we need to reformulate some of this stuff. I'm not saying what it looks like, but it's just a conversation worth having.
I know. Well, I mean, obviously they're looking at this independent regulator in the UK, in England anyway. I think I understand the argument. I just think it's not easy because if you set up a competition, then you set the rules and then you have to impose them, and people have to follow those rules. Getting somebody else to do it, I think
It's an
makes
independent.
it.
It's an
I
independent.
think
Like the bank. The banks don't regulate themselves. Six. It's not a Barclays and all that. There is an outside body that regulates the banks or other industries. Football seems to be the only one that has everything in one basket. And it just seems something that's worth looking at. Not only is it a more lucrative industry than it's ever been, with the billions of euros or pounds or whatever, floating around the world. There's also, I guess, this kind of such a social importance, and people want to. It's only a game, but it seems to be really, really important to so many people. It does need to be regulated correctly, maybe.
So we do have a global regulator, European regulator, national regulators. It just seems like a whole load of extra bureaucracy.
Well, look, do you think they're regulating the game well at the moment? That's the question. Well, let's just leave it.
And then there are questions over the people brought in as supposedly independent regulators. We see that at UEFA bringing in Sunil Gulati, the former US soccer president, in to oversee financial fair play. Is he actually independent? Is someone you often see in and around Champions League finals and events like that?
Yeah, this is the thing, how your appointment process. But all I'm saying is other industries have been able to do it. Football seems to always think it's special. And we have these crises. I mean, look, we haven't got enough time here to talk about the various FFP stories again ad nauseum, but everyone knows what they are, plus other disciplinary issues within the game, and this debate of the calendar, which we can get into.
Before we do, though, let's go a bit deeper on the situation at Juventus and cross to Milan now and join the Gazzetta dello Sport reporter Fabio Licari. Fabio, welcome to Sport Unlocked. Just how bad are things looking at Juve?
We can start not from now, but from the Ronaldo business. Imagine you are Juventus. You, in 2015, 2017, you got the final of Champions League. You lost against Real Madrid and Barcelona, but you show that you can be at the same level of the top team. Now you need something just a little more. And the situation is that Ronaldo is not happy, no more happy in Real Madrid. You want to change. Juventus understood the situation. There was the occasion to buy Ronaldo. What you can do if you're Juventus? I think that if you're Juventus, you decide to buy Ronaldo with all the consequence. To be honest, not everybody in the team was in favor of this kind of operation. Ronaldo cost more than 100 million of euro, 112, I think, to buy him. Ronaldo got 55 million every year by salary. So we arrive at 280. There is Raiola, the commission of Raiola. We speak a lot about commission with no financial fair play. So it's an operation more than 300 million of euros. And what happens? Juventus, in the year of Ronaldo, won one Scudetto less than before, because before with Allegri Conte, you won the Scudetto every year. Now, no. And in Champions League, stopped before Allegri that arrived 2 times in final. So you can say that the operation is a failure, not a good result. But now you are prisoner of the Ronaldo salary, Ronaldo operation, and of the change of the coach every year. And now you have just an explanation how is the situation of Juventus. Juventus is in a big trouble, and that's one of the reasons why now we speak about Super League. Why Andrea Agnelli is one of the promoter of Super League with Florentino Perez and Barcelona, Laporta now, because they need money. I understand their point of view, because they want sustainability, and they say, but now we are at the top. How can we stay at the top without the money? Because, you know, the system, if you are outside of Champions League just for 1 year, your budget go to the hell, because you lost 80, 90, 100 million of money prize from UEFA, you lost the tickets on the stadium, you lost a sponsor, so it's a drama. You can't stay out of the Champions League. The reason is to stay for the life in Champions League, creating a Super League. But the Super League is a big problem, and I don't speak about ethical problem, about sport problem, because if Juventus is in Super League, Napoli, Lazio, Roma will not be in Super League. I say just another story. Maybe with Super League, Juventus will have a budget not 300 million every year, but 600 million, okay? Because the price is incredible. The day Juventus has 600 million of euro, Ronaldo, or the Ronaldo of the future, will ask the double of his income, of his salary, and the commission will be the double. And so I think that if we don't change the rules of the games, the situation will be the same now with a top level, because the budget will be more. Now Juventus has this big problem, a loss, and again they should put money on the budget, but it's not easy to came out. As before, more they win, more they go up. Now, more they lose, more they go down. I don't know how can go out of this situation. Just winning suddenly Campionato and Champions League, but it's not easy.
I mean, the situation on the field is equally bad at the moment. They're near the bottom of the table. If they do not qualify for the Champions League this season, that's a disaster. What does that mean for Andrea Agnelli himself? Does he come under pressure to move aside?
The situation is dramatic for him and for the club, because Juventus is a family team in some way. To be 1 year outside the Champions League could be a drama. To be 2 years outside the Champions League, that means an earthquake for Juventus, and for Bayern if happens the same, for City if happens the same. But now is the Juventus in dramatic situation, because his situation of salary, of debt, of deficit, of budget are dramatic. What can happen? It can happen a revolution. Sometimes a revolution happens. If you remember, Juventus start to be again one top team with Andrea Agnelli after a long time of crisis, because they didn't win and because they go in second division. They went in second division after the Calciopoli, what we call Calciopoli story. Now they have a fantastic period, 10 years of winning. But now he has difficulties because team arrive from 3 seasons with 3 different coach. Allegri, Sarri, Pirlo. Allegri was like Trapattoni, a man who managed the group, his leadership, but he is not scientific in his organizational field. Sarri is the most scientific of, with Chelsea, with Napoli. Is another totally different kind of football. And Pirlo is fantastic player, but for the first time on a bench. Now the player come back to Allegri. They don't understand what kind of football they have to play now. And the big problem is the midfield, because Juventus has a fantastic back players. Bonucci, Chiellini, what they are on the field. They have good forwards, but they have no midfield, and without organization, there is no play. Now they bought Locatelli, who is a very good player, but Locatelli alone is not enough. So I am not optimistic about the future of Juventus in this league. I hope to made a mistake. And I have to say, mea culpa, because I thought that Allegri was ready to use the weapons he has to change the trend. But I think maybe 2 years outside of the field change something even in his way to act. 2 years outside, maybe change Allegri too.
Well, what's the view inside Italy of Andrea Agnelli and his part in the Super League? And
many people now hate Agnelli. Many people loves him, but the project of Super League has more enemies than friends now. And for sure, Agnelli is a man who represents Agnelli family, the most rich family in Italy. For sure, there is jealousy against him. It's normal in the life. This, I say that Agnelli maybe can respect more the other fans, because he made some mistake. For example, when he said, you remember why Atalanta is in Champions League, is Atalanta was playing better than Juventus in the last season. So that was as autogol, as we call. But for sure, the idea of Super League will alienate sympathy to him.
Fabio, thanks for joining us from Milan. Fabio Licari from Gazzetta dello Sport, giving us the inside track on all things Juve. Well, it's not quite as perilous there as it is at Derby County. How have things got into such a mess for Derby as they enter administration?
So yeah, Derby have accumulated a large amount of debt, more than £50 million. They haven't got the income to deal with that. They haven't been able to get back into the Premier League, which has been the whole aim of the owner, Mel Morris. He's been unable to sell the club because of A, the debt, B, the lack of income it has at the moment, and the other factor is they effectively tried to fiddle the financial fair play rules in the Championship by selling their Pride Park Stadium to a company owned by Mel Morris. So they sort of gave themselves some income on paper by selling the stadium, but actually now left in a situation where the club has gone into administration. It hasn't got any assets because the stadium is no longer an asset. So that can't be used by the administrators to raise funds. Can't be part of any sale. The transfer window's gone. They can't sell any players. They're under a transfer embargo. The whole thing is a complete shambles. I mean, the staff have been worried if they're actually going to get paid. They've already had a 12-point deduction. They could have another 12-point deduction imposed. I actually think there's real fears whether it can avoid liquidation because there just doesn't seem to be any easy way out. No, I can't see anyone wanting to come forward and take on that particular burden. And for one of the most historic clubs in England, it would be an absolute tragedy if that happens.
They almost need a Arab sheikh or someone to come riding to the rescue here, right? The proportions of the problems you've described there, Zeke, sounds like someone who's willing to, or a state or something willing to totally bankroll, a dumpster fire to rescue it, because like a regular businessman or woman is gonna really struggle to bring this back, right?
And that was one of the things we were hearing from the EFL chief executive Trevor Birch when he spoke to the media. We talked about the issues with the benefactor model and what happens when the owner funding tap is switched off. It leaves them in a precarious situation, and it's happened before and it will happen again. And just how can this be stopped unless you do something like you have to offer a decade of financial guarantees or longer to be able to show you can sustain your finances?
Yes, and also some regulations. I know that these regulations are in place, but how solid are these rules and regulations if the club is able to get into that mess in the first place? It's all well and good deducting points and all of that down the road, but teams have been getting into this mess by overspending in order to try and get promoted. That's kind of a journey that you see coming. So that tap that suddenly turns off. Why is Trevor not talking about when the tap's on? Why are they not talking to them? And the other thing I was thinking about, and we see it at all the clubs, where the fans start screaming at owners to start spending, and I'm not going to swear, some money. And the thing is, we want it a little bit both ways. Can you start spending money and improving our chances, which is kind of a very natural feeling. If you're a supporter, you want to try and do better, but then you're spending more than your balance sheet can afford, and then when everything goes wrong, we're then saying, "Oh, this guy's come in and ruined our club." Again, like, which way do we want it?
Which we saw even with the signing of Wayne Rooney initially to Derby when he left DC United in 2019, financing that deal alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And they got managers on high contract. Philip Cocu was there as well, if I remember right. I don't know. It just seems there is such a lack of order. And do you think Derby's the line in the sand, Ziggs? Do you think this is the one where finally heads are going to be smashed together and we're going to come up with something smarter?
Well, I think Portsmouth was a line in the sand for the Premier League, and as a result of that, they brought in much tougher sort of guarantees you have to give over like financial sustainability and proof of as the club as a going concern. I wonder if now we're going to see a similar thing in the EFL because Derby is would be such a big club to go under. A bit similar to Portsmouth in a way. That it may well this may be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Well, financially, In English football, something that could be also quite pivotal is the future of BT, something you've been reporting on, Ziegs, about a potential DAZN takeover of BT Sport. What would it mean for the game?
It's an interesting one. So BT have been inviting offers, interest from for a few months, and I think basically they don't want to have the sport arm anymore. There's been new people running the operation. I think they're sort of the idea of why they actually launched BT Sport in the first place. I think that the shareholders think it's probably was an experiment which didn't work that well. Now they want to get rid of it. DAZN, despite the fact they've been losing money hand over fist, are spending quite a bit. They've got various sports rights. They've got the boxing rights for the UK with Matchroom, and this would be a way of getting Premier League rights, which I think they believe is crucially important to making them solvent. But the guy who runs it has got a lot of money, Tariq. Has he got enough?
That's a good question. He's been funding a massively loss-making company for years. They've been growing extremely quickly around the world, buying rights starting in Japan a few years ago and coming westwards across Europe. And maybe this would be clearly one of the biggest and most costly investments DAZN is going to make. The guy is Len Blavatnik, born in the former Soviet Union, now I think resident in London. He's making a very, very big bet here. DAZN, according to the last set of accounts, loses a huge amount of money in order to fuel this growth. It used to own I think the website gold.com, and it shed that a few months ago to raise a bit more capital for this business. Eventually, talking to people over the last couple of years there, this thing will have to start breaking even. Some people say the way that out for DAZN or the way out for Len Blavatnik is a possible IPO, a listing on a stock exchange. But for me, until it can prove a pathway to profitability, which I've yet to see, maybe smarter people have, that what would shareholders be buying? This a company. Yes, you own all these rights, but then it hemorrhages money. And the thing with rights as well, Ziegs, as both of you guys know, is that they're sold on cycles, 3-year cycles, 4-year cycles. They're the more regular ones. So these assets as well, they're not like fixed things that the company owns. It's not bricks and mortar. It's not something that this company owns. They kind of lease them, plus their audience, these subscribers that they're going to attract, they're beholden to the rights they own. So as long as it seems very difficult to me, and you're competing against huge companies in the sports rights markets. We've seen Amazon come in. We've seen, the example of BT is a good one. This is a company that was selling broadband, telephone services, etc. Sky sells broadband and other infrastructure. You can have this sports bit being a bit of a loss leader to attract other customers for other parts of your business. DAZN is purely a sports play. This to me sounds good luck to them. Is all I say. It'll be interesting to see if this works.
Yeah, one of the things DAZN perhaps maybe learning from 11 Sports is having more premium rights, where 11 Sports, particularly in the UK, had a lot of lesser leagues which weren't really appealing for people to subscribe to. And there's probably still that sort of element of the public getting used to streaming services rather than the traditional linear channels. And we've seen that in Italy this week, where DAZN have picked up Serie A rights this season, yet they had technical outages, which meant you couldn't actually watch some of the games on the app. And, they experienced all these problems, DAZN having to apologise. And it just perhaps creates that element of customers maybe preferring to be able to switch on a regular satellite or cable service to watch the games.
Yeah, that was about. I was going to just ask about that. What you thought about whether the UK is ready to have just streaming. I mean, I suppose Amazon does it, and we've seen they've got the tennis and pretty successful. But unless you get the technology right, then it could be a big problem, isn't it? If you're going to have buffering and outages and all this sort of thing. If that's not right, then you very swiftly will lead to people deserting you, I guess.
It comes down to actually ease for customers as well. Even in the UK, they're talking about a new combined streaming service for the likes of BBC, ITV, I think Channel 4, but also making sure there's a button for it on new remote control. So actually it just jumps you to it, which would obviously make things far easier. Well, that's a look through some of the various talking points across the sports news world this week. I think it's a chance to sort of delve a bit deeper into the FIFA and UEFA battles. And this is a week when we've had quite a few developments in those plans for biennial World Cups. It's something I think we're going to return to quite frequently because it is a fast-moving situation. So this week we've had what I see as a bit of reverse engineering of the consultation process. We've had announcements of FIFA from various legends about the importance of reworking the international match calendar, but that has to happen anyway from 2024. We do already know FIFA's desired outcome anyway, which is biennial World Cups. They've already announced the end of the process, haven't they?
Well, they have announced the apparent end of their process or their desired end of the process. Whether that's actually what they believe will happen is a different matter entirely. I reckon this is a sort of a bargaining position. Or do you think the fact that they put it out there so strongly means that they're now stuck with having to bring it in if it goes to a vote? I mean, I kind of get the impression that quite a few federations will do exactly what Gianni Infantino wants. So
completely, and this goes to our earlier conversation. These are the dudes. I say dudes because they're almost all men who get a say, and they tend to do whatever the guy who holds the purse strings tells them to do. Certainly, as far as those countries that are beholden to FIFA's cash distribution for most of their income. So yes, Siegs, we've seen that in the past. The other thing that I found quite interesting is there's been this pushback from UEFA this week, and again, it's been a pushback from UEFA for the last 2 weeks, right? But they put a more detailed statement out outlining a number of reasons why they have concerns over the consequences of a biennial World Cup. And they talk about calendar and formats and impact on existing club and national team competitions and the commercial and sporting opportunities of those. But one of the things I found quite interesting, they started talking about the impact of these additional games or an additional tournament players' fitness and mental health, right? I was like, that's a bit rich because we're about to start from 2024 a new Champions League, a new Europa League concept, which adds 100 more extra games in those competitions. It seems like picking and choosing when we talk about where the strain is. And I guess this talks to a wider tension about who gets to control we're talking about the men's game largely here, the men's football calendar and who gets more of their dates on it.
And also, we touched on it earlier about Manchester City and the issue of fans and filling the stadium for Champions League games. Already, you'd say the group stage is straining at the interest of fans. Yes, we get some exciting moments, Manchester United losing to Young Boys, but they still have a lot of time to turn it around. Post-2024, we're talking about not 6, but 10 group stage games per team crammed into that period before the end of the year. And that's an extra burden on players. And the European Club Association have also joined the fray this week, criticising FIFA's biennial World Cup plans and also reflecting player workload amongst their concerns. But again, the European Club Association were one of the driving forces behind the expansion of the Champions League.
So, well, the question of who owns football, doesn't it? Do the clubs? I mean, the clubs want to have more matches in Europe because they want more money, and they pay the players. So, should they have more say in what happens, or should FIFA have more say in what happens? And you can see sorry, you can see why FIFA want a bigger share of the money, because it's what it all comes down to. Their responsibility is to grow the game internationally. But have they gone about it the right way? No, because what they must have known they were going to get into an almighty fight with UEFA. And Alexander Sheffrin is somebody who appears to relish a fight and will come out and in the hardest possible way. What is the point of having this massive conflict? I really don't understand that particular part of it.
One of the hearts of the conflict actually links back to some plans from a few years ago that were being financed by SoftBank. So, where was Gianni Infantino this week?
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, he's in New York for the United Nations Week. A nice place to meet all the world leaders and have a photo op in one place. But he also had
those world leaders who do actually probably have more pressing matters, but he made sure he got himself a few pictures with some
president
of them.
to president. It kind of makes sense. The other, yeah, he had a meeting with the head of SoftBank in New York, and that that's quite timely. This relationship with SoftBank, funny enough, comes at an interesting time. They're in conflict with UEFA clearly at the moment, and this was actually the start of this massive rift between Gianni Infantino and Alexander Sheffrin, dating back to this meeting in Bogota in March 2018. It was a FIFA Council meeting over there, and I remember being there. It was a regular council meeting, but never seen the temperature so high. People were very angry as they left, and what had happened was these documents were placed in front of the FIFA Council members. They were asked to sign them. SoftBank wasn't named on them. Subsequently, that merged which company it was going to be. They were asked, look, we've got a $25 billion deal here on the table. We can't tell you who it's with. FIFA Infantino told these guys because we've signed a non-disclosure agreement. And we need you to sign it and we can get it done in 60 days. And that the members said, absolutely no chance. If you're not going to tell us what this is for and who it's with, no way. And look where we are today. This is where the chaos began.
And also where a lot of the distrust comes from as well between the parties. And, if we look back at those plans, what it would have been not only FIFA selling the commercial rights, but also launching a joint venture, which would have seen them only have 51% of it. So these were plans to launch the expanded 24-team Club World Cup, as well as a Global Nations League to run every 2 years. And FIFA claimed they could have underwritten guaranteed revenues of at least $25 billion for the competition. And the fact is they had to act now or they might lose out on this funding, which certainly rang alarm bells, the haste of it all. And perhaps we're seeing some of that now too with this rush to bring in the biennial World Cup plans. But there was a lot of distrust from that period in 2018. And fast forward a few months and both myself and Tariq, we were in Kigali at the FIFA Council meeting then, when it was also on the table.
Yeah, that was interesting as well, because that was a year apart, if I remember right, and the two men, if you think about it, the two most senior officials in world football, they hadn't spoken for a year, and that talks to the dysfunctional relationship. I think they are on speaking terms at least now, and that is sensible, clearly.
But there was a dinner in the hotel reputedly in Kigali when Chef and Infantino wouldn't speak to each other. It's almost like they're having to apparently pass messages across the table. I think
it's embarrassing, Rob. That's not how this really shouldn't be the way things work, right?
Also, the president of Rwanda was at the dinner as well, Paul Kagame, I think.
Big football fan.
Well, yeah, the Arsenal backer. And then, of course, those plans did eventually collapse for the Global Nations League, but eventually UEFA did cave in by the time of March 2019 in Miami at the council meeting and did agree to the Club World Cup as long as effectively there's only going to be 8 rather than 12 European teams out of the 24.
It kind of caved in because they wanted to control the access list of their club entrance, and I think that's fine, but it was going to be a watered down group, perhaps.
They wanted Europa League
In
winners in.
order, and you could see you could actually make a case for it, but in order to make sure that this Club World Cup doesn't impinge on the sort of primacy of the Champions League as the world's top club tournament, and that is again this tension about who controls football, who owns the best properties. It's the same argument, we've all these things we talk about, they always seem to end at the same point.
Yeah, it always ends with money, doesn't it? Because that is driving all of these things. So it's not about what, to me, it's not necessarily about what's best for the game. It's all about money. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. It now seems everyone, not or the club, whether it's you're a club, a confederation, or FIFA itself, it just seems to be about controlling the dollars.
And some of this opposition to those Club World Cup plans in 2019 were in part due to UEFA's own vision at the time. It's very easy to forget now, in the midst of the fallout from the Super League and the strident opposition to it from UEFA and indeed the European Club Association, that back in 2019, UEFA and the European Club Association were working together with their own plans for a new look Champions League, where 24 out of the 32 teams would have been locked in with their places every year. They were looking to turn the Champions League into a largely closed competition before actually the uprising by the middle ranking and small clubs across Europe helped to crush that. And so much so that at the time of another FIFA meeting, the FIFA Congress in Paris in June of 2019, the French President Emmanuel Macron actually at a reception criticised UEFA in front of Sheffield and Infantino when he was complaining about the expansion of competitions, and Sheffield was annoyed at that point. He said Macron's speech was a clear interference of the politics in sports, which surprised many of us. So that was yet another tension point between Infantino and Sheffield.
I think UEFA realised that they had backed the wrong horse on that one. I mean, it's incredible now that they even went down that road. They went in with Agnelli's and the ECA, this idea of having something 14 group games, and as you say, most of the clubs not even having to qualify through the domestic leagues. That was, I mean, whoever thought that was a good idea at UEFA, I mean, absolute madness. And you can argue perhaps that led to the Super League project, and that was probably a good thing because that has provided a readjustment now in the whole way of, the big clubs no longer run things quite as much as they used to.
Yeah, I know it's early days in the season, but it's funny. Agnelli and whoever's running Barcelona, Laporta, they'll probably wish that thing had gone through. I mean, Juventus very close to the relegation places after the first few games. Barcelona, goodness knows, total catastrophe over there on financially and on the playing side. It'd be interesting to see, next year if they're actually participants in the top club competition.
I feel it's often good to have these sort of step backs to be able to sort of catch up on some of the background, because I think things can move on at such a pace that we do forget how we reached this point. We are only 5 years into the presidencies at UEFA and FIFA of both Sheffield and Infantino. It can seem like far longer. They've been engaged in so many battles. There's one name that we do rarely mention, but actually should probably feature more prominently in all this. Many years ago, we were used to hearing very often from Jerome Valcke, the FIFA Secretary General. Remember, he once said that Brazil needed a kick up the arse to deal with their planning on the 2014 World Cup. We hear absolutely nothing at all on vision or future of football or the game globally from the current FIFA Secretary General, Fatma Samora. In fact, a lot of the correspondence that we managed to obtain is addressed to her deputies from the likes of UEFA and the European Club Association.
Yeah.
Where's Fatma?
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? She essentially is the chief executive officer of FIFA, and according to the reforms, those urgent reforms that FIFA passed following the Department of Justice indictment in 2015, she is supposed to be much more powerful in terms of executing the vision of the FIFA Council. The president is supposed to be a guiding light. Here we have the epitome, I'd say, of an executive president. This Gianni Infantino is across all of this stuff, Meanwhile, from what I've gleaned in the last few weeks, Fatma Samura has been on a kind of live tweeting tour. It started with the Beach World Cup in Moscow, moved on to the Futsal World Cup, I think, in Lithuania, and is now in Nigeria at the Aisha Buhari Women's International Tournament. And it's nice to be kept abreast of these things, I guess, but I'm not sure it's a job of the FIFA Secretary General. Is that the best use of her time? Meanwhile, Gianni's at the United Nations in New York. If FIFA had an in-house expert on the United Nations, surely it's the career United Nations senior official, Fatma Samura. Why is she not present with him? We just rarely see her. It's like, I really feel quite strongly about this as well, because she's got such a great platform for women, and I can't think of a more senior African figure in sports as well than her. And she's just not visible in any meaningful context. We've spent an hour here talking about all these, important issues in world football, the things that are going to determine what's going to happen to this game for a decade, if not longer. And this person is just not present. I don't understand what's happening.
And again, as we take those steps back into 2015 and those envisaged FIFA reforms to ensure the presidency was no longer an executive position and in fact the chief executive was more powerful, well, one of the people who was sitting on that reform committee at the time was Gianni Infantino, before it was known he would be a candidate for the FIFA presidency. So he helped construct these reforms that would actually reduce the power of the presidency. And ultimately, he gets into power and elevates himself. And I think, obviously, there was a time when Sheikh Salman of Bahrain was seen as the front runner for that post, and perhaps he was brought down by opposition to human rights in Bahrain, particularly from Germany. And maybe we would end up in a different position if he'd won. Although actually, I get the sense maybe Gianni would have ended up still as the Secretary General, and he would have actually then made that position the powerful one still.
Well, so I've got a question for you then. We were talking about oversight of governance. Here's a good one. So FIFA has this reform statute. We've just talked about it. It's not imposing its own kind of rules. And who's there to tell them to do it?
Well, I know that, Tariq, but who can be there to do it? I mean, do you know what I mean? Who can tell them? It's like saying, who, in a way, who's telling the British government what to? Do you know what I mean? You don't have somebody overseeing the British government, do you?
Well, we did have the courts, didn't they? When the Boris Johnson's attempt to prorogue Parliament was ruled illegal, the fact he misled the Queen, wasn't it the Supreme Court that ruled that?
Yes, the courts are meant to be there to keep governments in check. And you can say the courts are also there perhaps to keep sports organisations in check. But, I mean, you can't... I don't think you can have some sort of regulator in charge of FIFA.
Well, all right. How about separating the institution up? FIFA has three fundamental jobs to me, it seems like. One is organising this World Cup. That's a sort of event organising function. Two, it is a disciplinary and governance body. And three, it is a development body. It dispenses billions of dollars around the world on football development. The president is the same guy who gets elected. What's stopping this guy using that development function from getting all the things he wants passed in the other roles he has, or using the disciplinary function? This thing should be broken down into pieces, and I would argue that maybe for the regional ones as well. Just a thought that you do split these roles up, because to me they're in conflict with each other and can be used for the benefit of a select few people in power.
Well, we have actually obviously seen that over many years with, the whole Blatter era was that the FIFA's gold project was basically used to reward his supporters, wasn't he? So, I know. I'm not saying it's works well or is right. I'm just saying it's not. I don't see how you have somebody sitting above them, because who sits above them? Who regulates the regulators?
And should some of their decision-making this week have been regulated too on the disciplinary front? We covered the racist abuse of England players in Hungary a few weeks ago in quite a bit of depth on the pod. This week we had the verdict in. Hungary ordered to play one game behind closed doors, the next World Cup qualifier, and also a fine of 200,000 Swiss francs, so about $220,000. But particularly the point raised by the Fair Network is that why is expulsion from the World Cup not being considered? It just shows how disjointed, particularly UEFA and FIFA are, and their lack of interlinking sense that if you're to accumulate all their sanctions, they'd be facing expulsion. Fact is, Hungary has been ordered to play games behind closed doors in qualifying for the 2014 World Cup, Euro 2016, now the 2022 World Cup. They've got 2 games already behind closed doors. Next June in the Nations League as well.
Yeah, so how many are they missing? To be clear, is it like 5 spread over God knows when, or what have we got?
Well, it's actually isn't it only actually 2
from FIFA?
Well, it's 1 from FIFA and 1 from UEFA.
Oh, wow.
And from FIFA, if they do, the point is FIFA's punishment said there'd be an additional game played behind closed doors. That's on probation for 2 years. But actually, effectively, Hungary are already on probation if you think about the UEFA
exactly
case.
Right. Surely that was the they've seen their repeat offenders. When is so? It has to be in a FIFA competition when the repeat offence happens. That just is bonkers, isn't it? Because the whole world could see what happened.
The oddities of the way football governance is, and it's been good for the hour to be able to reflect on some of those.
Yeah, I mean, it was great talking to you. Great disagreeing with you as well at times.
Yeah.
Please, anyone who wants to disagree with us, send in your disagreements, things you disagree with us, or bigger issues you want us to debate on.
Guys, nice to see you this week.
Absolutely. And thank you, everyone, for listening. That's all from me, Rob Harris, from Tariq, Panja, and Martyn Ziegler. Enjoy your sports viewing in the days ahead. Hit subscribe on this pod and send us your feedback at Sport Unlocked on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Goodbye for now.